We'll begin on page 88, so ask you to be ready for that, please. Pastor Wood, are there any additional requests for prayer you have other than any that you have already mentioned?
The coming election.
I guess I'll let you in on this little secret. We've been going up north towards Greenville and Spartanburg and up in there. And we have to go right by a place spelled C-L-I-N-T-O-N. Pastor Wood won't even pronounce it. You folks don't like me to bring that up here? Well, I think I'll just preach a sermon on that tonight. I do hope you're praying about that. I don't think in a group like this there'd be very many who are dissidents. But I mean, when somebody is for sexuality and for abortion and things like that. How many of you are pretty well concerned about this coming election? Are you? Yeah. I was telling my class, I guess, yesterday that, let me see, now it's 13 days to the election, and so there are 13,000 years till the election. One day is with the Lord as 1,000 years. And I'm claiming that. And for one thing, this old Republican is hard to convince by a Democrat. A Democrat will never convince me of anything much. And I'm not convinced that Mr. Bush is as far behind as the polls seem to indicate. I don't know, how many of you feel that way? Do you feel that way? Well, good, you're right, you agree with me. But we do want to pray for our nation. And if Mr. Bush wins, then we need real prayer this second term. Real prayer. We prayed a good bit because we've had the Gulf crisis that sent a lot of our men over there and all. We need to pray, but we need to pray for our nation in a new way. You say, well, we're just beyond hope. Folks, we're not beyond hope. As long as Christ is living in me and living in you, we're not beyond hope.
Right. Amen.
So, Pastor Wood, would you lead our prayer, please?
Our Father, we do thank Thee for the weapons of our warfare, that they're not carnal, they're spiritual, they're mighty. Tear down the strongholds. We do pray. Thou spur the hearts of those who are saved, and those who can get prayers answered to pray fervently for this coming election. Father, we do believe President Bush and Vice President Quayle definitely stand on the side of righteousness, as opposed to these men that believe in homosexuals being considered just like ordinary people, and that they can even marry and have families and to abort babies and all the other wicked, ungodly things they believe. We pray, Lord, for the defeat of this man who believes in the enemy of God. Now we do pray for Thy blessing upon the class tonight. We're so glad for it. Thank You for what Thou will do here tonight. Thank You for the people that are here. And I pray for them, Father, that they might get help from being here tonight. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. I want to give two more general impressions of the book of Galatians. My eighth general impression is connected with the letter N. If any of you are new tonight, I've been giving these 9 general impressions of Galatians in the form of an acrostic on Galatians. And I've come to number 8, neglected book. Neglected book. One reason why the message of Galatians is neglected even more than some other books of the Bible is that it is so severe. I want to give you 2 illustrations or evidences of the fact that Galatians is a neglected book. One illustration of it is the common idea that the age of law comes before the age of grace. The common idea that the age of law comes before the age of grace. For example, you say, now, here's the Old Testament age, and here's the age of law, And then here's the New Testament age, the age of grace. Let me ask a twofold question. How many of you have ever heard that? May I see your hands? How many of you have believed that? May I see your hands? You see, if you believe that, then you don't understand Galatians. Because Galatians has the clearest passage knocking that in the head. I'll not give it to you now except just the reference. It's Galatians 3:15 to 22. Galatians 3:15 to 22 shows that the covenant of grace with Abraham came before the Mosaic law. It came before the Mosaic law. Well, many of us deal with it in a slightly different way. More of that later. But that just shows how neglected the book of Galatians is. That's that common idea, and many of very earnest Christians hold that. They don't follow it through logically. They'll come right on back and say that people in Old Testament times were saved by grace, and yet the age of law in the Old Testament, the age of grace in the New Testament. The second illustration of the fact that Galatians is a neglected book is the neglect of Galatians in the Bible conference movement. The neglect of Galatians in the Bible conference movement. The Bible conference movement has made a great difference in my personal Christian life. That's the first contact that I ever had with Columbia Bible College. It was Ben Lippin, not then, we called Ben Lippin a long time afterward, but he used to meet at Camp Elida, which is the Methodist grounds, meeting grounds up near Asheville, not too far from the place where the Ben Lippin property was later located. And that's the first time I ever heard Dr. McQuilkin. He spoke from 1 John, 7 things you can know. The only thing I remember is you can know you're saved because I didn't. See, and others may have presented that to me before, but it never gone in. Never gone in. And that became a starting point in my life. And then the whole Bible conference movement. It's been my privilege to speak at a few Bible conferences through the years. But the Bible conference movement is dear to my heart. It's dear to my heart. But the book of Galatians is not a favorite book in the Bible conference movement. Now, Galatians 2:20 is an isolated verse that's used. And then what is that other passage? That's Galatians 5:19 to 24, the fruit of the Spirit over against the works of the flesh. That is used in the Bible conference movement, but the burning message of Galatians is just not emphasized in the Bible conference movement. Many, not just a few, but many who've been attending the Bible conferences for years have a very soft view about Roman Catholicism. You see, the idea is, now we've got people here for just a week or less than a week, and we don't want to have anything negative much. Yeah, we could have negative things about which Christians in general would agree more, but for instance, somebody may bring a Roman Catholic to the conference. And if somebody brings a Roman Catholic to the conference, we don't ought to hit him between the eyes. Some of them never will be saved unless they're hit between the eyes. Now, that's not the only way to do it. I think there are times when God leads so that they aren't mentioned that way. I mentioned the Roman Catholics in one meeting away from here not long ago, and somebody said, I noticed tonight that a Roman Catholic was there. You didn't say anything about the Catholics that night, but I had been saying it. But not that night. I believe God was leading. See, I wasn't holding back. You look around, oh, this Catholic here must not say anything. No, a good many who've been effective in winning Catholics, the Lord said, often you have to hit them between the eyes. They don't use that expression. And of course, somebody might take that literally. And you know what I mean and what I don't mean. But I think you do know what I do mean. And then many who have been going to Bible conferences for years are being ensnared by the movement of psychiatrical victory. Yeah. Oh, they just think Dr. Gothard is sprouting wings. And I believe he's sprouting horns. Yeah. See? But they've not been faced with that at the Bible conferences. No, you'll drive away Gothardites. Well, there's a right way to do it and a wrong way. After all, the main thing is not how do you do it, but do you do it in the power of the Holy Spirit?
Yeah.
If it's done in the power of the Holy Spirit, God's going to use it to deliver some of those folks. And they badly need to be delivered. And I'm going to show you more and more about that as we go through the book of Galatians. Jeremiah 5:30 and 31 I want to read for you. Jeremiah 5:30 and 31 says, "A wonderful and horrible thing is come to pass in the land. The prophets prophesy falsely, and the priests bear rule by their means. And my people love to have it so." And my people love to have it so. I want to tell you, folks, the teachings of Dr. James Dobson that are literally flooded with Galatianism, God's people love to have it so.
Yeah.
They are enamored of that stuff.
Right.
Someone was talking to me about Dr. Gothard, and he used to be in Atlanta. He still comes to Atlanta in Dr. Stanley's church now, but for a long time, the meetings were held in the Omni, the big convention center in Atlanta. And says somebody will come up to you and say, "Have you heard Dr. Gothard?" "No, I haven't." "Oh," and the eyes would just sparkle. "Oh, you ought to hear him. You ought to hear him. My people love to have it so." And a lot of preachers have been burned by that. Yeah. Some of my preacher friends have gone to that kind of thing. One or two of them haven't turned away from me. And I haven't turned away from them. But the others, I don't have to turn away from. They've turned away from me because he's their pet. Their eyes sparkle. My people love to have it so. Folks, this is deadly stuff. This is deadly stuff. Well, I hope you'll see it with me more as we go along. That's my eighth general impression, neglected book. Then my ninth general impression of Galatians is connected with the letter S. Shocking statements. Shocking statements. If you get into the message of Galatians, you're going to have your shock absorbers working overtime, because it is just filled with shocking statements. At the present, I want to mention only one of these shocking statements. It's in that passage at the end of chapter 4, Galatians 4, verses 21 to 31. Now listen to these shocking words from that section, chapter 4, 21 to 31. I'll just quote from chapter 4, verse 25. Chapter 4, verse 25 says, "Now this Hagar is Mount Sinai in Arabia." How do you get that? I missed that for years. Mount Sinai in Arabia, and answers to the Jerusalem that now is, for she is in bondage with her children. What is that passage saying? It's talking against the heresy of supplementing Christ. And Paul is saying all who supplement Christ are Arabs. All who supplement Christ are Arabs. Put yourself back now into the place of a Jew who was reading this. The Arabs, oh, I hate the Arabs. I hate the Arabs. And Paul's saying, you're a Judaizer. You know what the Judaizers were trying to do? They were saying that Gentiles had to become Jews before they could become Christians. They had to be circumcised and become Jews, and then they could become Christians. And Paul's saying, you Judaizers are Arabs. Whew, boy, that's a shocking statement. And I tell you, I'm going to go through some of these things and just give you my own deep convictions. These aren't just opinions. Often I give my opinions. But these are convictions about Dr. James Dobson and these others. If I'm even slightly accurate on that, Dr. James Dobson is an Arab. That's what God calls him. That's what God calls him. Boy, you pull that in the average congregation. And I'm saying don't just pull it out of the hat to try to be sensational, because you may get mobbed. Some folks will almost mob you on those things. I mean, they hate the ground you walk on. But if what I'm saying is accurate about him, and we'll go into that from time to time, is he's an Arab. He's an Arab. Every day in my life, I am tempted to become an Arab. Every day of my life, I'm tempted to supplement Jesus Christ. And every day of your life, you are tempted to supplement Jesus Christ. And if you do, you're an Arab. You know, for years I missed that. I just said Mount Sinai in Arabia, and then went on. Well, the whole point of that is everybody who supplements Christ is an Arab. What a shocking statement that is. But remember, God often has to shock you before you listen to Him. I know it's been true in my life. For instance, generally, I just don't like to be called down before my audience. But I've been called down before my classes from time to time. And it's right shocking. Boy, I can't begin to tell you what a blessing it's been. At the time, I didn't think it was, but I'm telling you it was. It's often you just have to be put right out there and shocked before you really listen to the Lord. Yeah. What the Lord is really saying to you. Let me take it one step more. Psalm 62 is the seed plot of Galatians. God only is our rock. Several times in that 62nd Psalm you have that note, and it's the God only Psalm. The God only Psalm. Seed plot of Galatians. All right, now let me apply this in a shocking way. There is such a thing as the King James only cult. Now let me stop and tell you what I don't mean. Not everybody who uses King James only belongs to the King James only cult. But there are a lot who belong to that cult, the King James only cult. And they are Arabs. They are Arabs because they're supplementing Christ. I've said from time to time as I've tried to think this thing through, there's some very earnest people who are strong on the King James only, and yet they don't belong to the cult. But often you have to tell them there's such a thing as a cult before they'll leave it. Because some of them belong to that. Generally, they don't really, by spirit, they don't go along with all of it. But you just have to tell them there is such a thing as a King James only cult. And what I've said from time to time is, what I miss in their emphasis is God only. You watch somebody who just brings this to you all the time, King James only! I say, brother, how about God only? How about God only? Then, if it's God only, then you may use only the King James. And you may advise others to use only the King James. That doesn't make you King James only in a cult. But there is such a thing as a cult. And it's splitting the fundamentalist movement wide open. It is splitting the one fundamentalist movement wide open. All right, that's my 9th general impression of Galatians. Shocking statements. And it's just filled with them. We'll see some of them later, but I do want to give you one then. How many of you had never seen that Paul is saying you Judaizers who supplement Christ are Arabs? How many of you have never seen that? I'd never seen that. I went for years on that. I just said, at Mount Sinai in Arabia, yeah, next. You know, you go on to the next one. Oh, it's not next. That's the main point. And every moment of my life, in a sense, I'm tempted to be an Arab, to supplement Christ. And every day of your life, you're tempted to be an Arab, to supplement Christ. On page 88, notice our indispensable principle. Rely on the Holy Spirit. And again, I just tell my class sometimes I like to teach a course. I used to teach Paul's epistles in one semester. And then every time I came to a new book, 13 letters plus Hebrews, I would repeat this. It gives me the opportunity. And I've had 2 or 3 students say me, they didn't like that repetition. But you know, I could say, well, maybe I didn't repeat it in the right way. But I think usually if they didn't like that repetition, it didn't take me long to do it. If they didn't like that repetition, they needed it. See, and I've known some of them, well, one person in particular who said he didn't like that helpless dependence. Keep repeating that over and over, helpless dependence, and all like that. But boy, he's making a living out of this psychological counseling these days. And when you look back, you realize, well, maybe I was wrong. Still think I might have been not done it the right way. But I don't apologize for this now. I think one reason people criticize you for repeating is you kind of halfway apologize for doing it. You know, if you kind of halfway apologize for it, folks will really think unconsciously. He doesn't take it too seriously. Just print the words I usually ask you to print, please, by the indispensable principle: helpless dependence. Helpless dependence on the Holy Spirit. And everything in your life that makes you more helplessly dependent is a forward step in Bible study, in knowing God's Word. And then Ephesians 1:17, take the veil away. Take the veil away. Our first principle is to seek to get a bird's eye view of the book as a whole. Would you just put the note responsible by this outline? Not everybody outlines it in exactly the same way, but there's some books in the Bible that nearly all writers outline in pretty much the same way. One's Romans, and another one is Galatians. See, chapters 1 and 2, the messenger of grace. Chapters 3 and 4, the doctrine of grace. And then 5 and 6, the outworkings of grace. State clearly and simply what you believe to be the central message of the book of Galatians. I just like to summarize it in these words: salvation through faith in Jesus Christ alone. Salvation through faith in Jesus Christ alone. I believe that's the great message of the book of Galatians. Salvation through faith in Jesus Christ alone. Salvation does not come through Jesus Christ plus something else. It comes through faith in Jesus Christ alone. What is legalism? You see, there's a difference. Somebody said law and grace, and then you come legalism and grace. See, there's a difference between those terms as they're used. I believe in the law of God, but don't believe in legalism. Legalism is trusting yourself. It's self-trust. It's adding trust in yourself to the Lord. Well, you know, these days, when anybody preaches high standards, people say legalism. Oh, how many have I heard mention that to me? If you preach about how a woman ought to dress, somebody says legalism, legalism. No, folks, that's not legalism. Legalism is Christ plus something else. That's what legalism is. And the book of Galatians is not a book against the law of God. Oh, no, it's a book against legalism. Trust in yourself, adding self-trust to Christ's trust. How's a drowning man rescued? Is the drowning man rescued by the lifeguard plus his own efforts? No. You see, his own efforts hinder the lifeguard. You know, sometimes the lifeguard seems mighty rough. He doubles up his fists, and sometimes he gives the man a knockout blow. He knocks him into unconsciousness. Because the man's efforts keep the lifeguard from doing what he wants to do and what he ought to do. Well, you see, here's Galatianism. Oh, I'm drowning, but I tell you, I'm trying hard, and I hope the Lord Jesus will rescue me, but I'm trying hard. You see, my efforts stand in his way. You say they indicate my earnestness. Well, see, folks, there's such a thing as an earnestness that comes from the Holy Spirit, and there's such a thing as an earnestness that comes from the flesh. It used to be in a prayer meeting when anybody prayed in a very earnest way, and when sometimes he cried as he was praying, I was deeply impressed. I'm not deeply impressed by that, and I'm not unimpressed by it. God knows his heart. God knows what's going on inside, and I don't know. I've seen some folks, they pray like that, and it seems to me the more I know of them, the more I'm impressed, because there seems to be an awful lot of reality there. An awful lot of reality. But you see, I cried, I'm in earnest. That doesn't prove a thing. That doesn't prove a thing. The efforts of the drowning man hinder the lifeguard. They don't help the lifeguard. Here's another illustration. A testimonial in behalf of some medicine. Person is, I know in my younger days we had certain patented medicines. One was Vigo. And they advertised that all the time, you know. People had jokes about Vigo and everything else. But somebody says, I took this medicine plus one of my own homemade remedies, and I'm well. Somebody says, how much did the homemade remedy do it? How much did the medicine do it? You see, a testimonial is no testimony at all. So I tell you, Jesus Christ saved me. I thank Him for it. Alcoholics Anonymous helped me a lot too. Oh, see, that's no testimony at all. That's a perversion of the gospel. A man who says that is an Arab. He's an Arab because he's supplementing Christ. This is one all-inclusive difference between Christianity and all the religions of the world. You know, they have courses called comparative religions, and some don't like to use the word religion at all. I think you almost have to if you're really warning people and taking into consideration the whole thing. Religion is not salvation. Religion is not salvation. And religion can send you straight to hell. No doubt about that. But the difference between Christianity and all the religions, some say comparative religions. Well, I would accept that if you'll say Christianity is not one of them. Christianity is not a comparative religion. It's the only true religion. It's the only true religion. Folks say, oh, what conceited folks you are. No person, dear friend, the Bible's a humble book. And I do believe the Bible, and if I believe the Bible, I know there's some humility in my life. It's bound to be if I believe the Bible. You say, I realize I'm awfully proud. I'm as proud as you are. I won't say that to an unsaved person, because I know I'm not. I had to come as a hell-deserving sinner before the Lord saved me. Amen. And you had to come as a hell-deserving sinner before the Lord saved you. But Christianity is the only religion that teaches salvation by pure grace. Amen. The only one. Some would say it's the only one that teaches the love of God. No, that isn't true. There's some of the heathen religions that contain quite a bit of emphasis on the love of their God. Most of them don't, but some of them do. And you say and then I used to say, Christianity is the only religion in the world that has a high place for womanhood. Well, it does have a high place for womanhood. And all these feminists. Really, no, I don't. I almost wish they'd get out of America. Because what's enabled them to stand up and speak like that? The gospel of Jesus Christ has given them that liberty. And then they go along with their feminist movement that degrades womanhood and degrades everything else in the world. And I used to say Christianity is the only religion that has a high place for women. No, that isn't true. Some of the religions, not Muslim religion, don't believe that, no. Say in the Quran, which is the Muslim Bible, there's only one reference to woman. And it's in the chapter entitled The Cow. See? And they don't exactly have a high place for woman. No, one or more of the heathen religions do. But here's the only religion that teaches salvation by pure grace. By pure grace. And anybody who doesn't is filled with heathenism. He's filled with heathenism. All right, now you see, I'm naming some names back and forth here. If you get mad, because I want you to see what I'm saying. I'd rather you get mad when you understand what I say than to think it's fine and you don't understand what I say. Dr. James Dobson is filled with heathenism. He's filled with heathenism. And if I ask some of you who haven't been in under this ministry before, if you really like James Dobson, some of you probably said, yes, I'm going to keep on liking him. All right, go on, you old heathen. That's strong language, folks, but you're an Arab. You're an Arab. I don't speak strongly like this on everything. Some folks have heard of my stand, some of the students before they came to the Bible college. One of the grad students told me, said, you know, I heard about some of your stands and all, and said, I just had the idea you and I were really going to have a bad time together. But he said, really, we've had a good time together. Yeah, you know, often when you quote somebody, you can quote it so that people are against him. Well, I don't mind it if it's really clear. But then he comes and is under the ministry, and we go along very much together. I'll tell you, if anybody knew it, it was Doug Stewart, one of our grad students. He was a almost Phi Beta Kappa, I think, at Davidson and all, before he came and all, and a real bright fellow. But he just thought we were going to get along terribly. But I think one thing that turned him was I confessed a sin I committed before the class one day. And I think that turned him towards me. I didn't do it to do it. I did it because I had to. I'd sinned before the class. One of the students, in a very abrupt kind of way, had called me down for something, and I let him have it with both barrels. And after the class, I knew that an apology was coming. And I shouldn't have called it an apology. It was plain old sin. I did call it sin. But I don't know whether I used the word apology or not. But remember, God won't accept an apology as substitute for confession of sin. Difference between those two things. If you've sinned, you don't need to apologize. You need to confess sin. Against thee only have I sinned. And when I lost my temper with that student in class, you say I sinned against him. No, I sinned against God only. I sinned against God only. One of the great warnings of Galatians can be expressed in these words. Stay out of the Godhead. Stay out of the Godhead. You see, Galatianism puts man into the Godhead. Puts man into the Godhead. We often use this expression, playing God. Don't play God. Dr. James Dobson is constantly playing God. He is constantly moving inside the Godhead. He's moving inside the Godhead. That's what Galatianism does. Folks, that's dangerous stuff. And I'm speaking in very plain terms right at the beginning, so that when I go on the rest of Galatians, you'll know all the way through some of the many things that are included in all this. And I'm including this old boy. My natural heart is a Galatianistic heart. Your natural heart is a Galatianistic heart. Christ isn't enough. I need to supplement him. You need to supplement him. And oh, how deadly, how dangerous that is. Draw a simple diagram which will aid you in a bird's eye view of the entire book of Galatians. Let me give you first again my diagram in its simplest form. My diagram in its simplest form is simply this, the thickly shaded cross, not this, not the cross plus. See, that's Galatianism. This isn't enough. No, this is insufficient. You need Jesus Christ plus something else. Now let me give you the diagram in its more detailed form. Chapters 1 and 2 are the two messengers. You say the messenger of salvation, the messenger of redemption. But Galatians all the way through uses the method of contrast, the two messengers. And you see the two that are described in those first two chapters. One is Paul before he was saved. He was the messenger of Judaism. The other was the Apostle Paul after he was saved. Which one do you prefer? Well, I tell you, there's just no comparison between the two. It's all contrast. Paul has been used of God to turn the world upside down. You know, when Paul and Barnabas came to one place, folks said, these are the men that turn the world upside down. They've come hither also. He turned the world upside down, but he didn't turn the world upside down when he was a messenger of Judaism. He turned the world upside down when he was crucified with Christ. Galatians 2:20. So that's the first two chapters. The two messengers, the messenger of Judaism over against the messenger of free grace. Then you come to the 3rd and the 4th chapters, chapters 3 and 4, which are the two doctrines. And you see here are the two doctrines. This is the central part of the book. Salvation by this, Christ alone, not by this, Christ plus. That's the central message. And you know, you can get so lost in some of those things. Oh, I tell you, chapters 3 and 4, they are dynamite, folks. They are dynamite. And they get you right into the heart of some of the theological debates of the ages. But the simple message is always there. And we get so sidetracked. Somebody says, I just don't understand any of that. Well, you do if you understand looking to Jesus alone. You do. And that's what that is. Salvation by Christ alone, not by Christ plus something else. Then, the last two chapters, 5 and 6, are the two results. If I believe this doctrine, what's the result? Works of the flesh. And those works of the flesh can be on a very low level, or they can be on a very high level. Boy, there's nothing good in the flesh. You know, I need to be saved from my own righteousness, just as much as I need to be saved from my sin. You need to be saved from your own righteousness, just as much as you need to be saved from your own sin. And it works of the flesh. And then the other result, if I live like this and really believe this doctrine, Christ alone, then I'll have the fruit of the Spirit. See, it's the works of the flesh over against the fruit of the Spirit. We're going into this in detail when we come to it later, but I want to remind you that fruit of the Spirit is not in the plural. It's singular. You say, how many fruits of the Spirit are there? Somebody says, count them up. 9 fruits of the Spirit. No, one. It's singular. The fruit of the Spirit is love. Dr. McQuilkin used to teach it from the standpoint, here's the one fruit of the Spirit, love, and then he called the other 8 love's children. And he put them together in twins, 4 sets of twins. 2 that go together, and 2 and 2 and 2. You can think of them in terms of that. But that's the fruit of the Spirit. And the Bible Conference movement has laid a lot of stress on the fruit of the Spirit, but it hasn't laid enough stress on the doctrine that results in the fruit of the Spirit. Somebody said, I just pray to be filled with the Spirit, and I take it by faith. He's filled me with the Spirit. I tell you, I have to have that based on this doctrine of looking to Jesus alone, not to Jesus plus something else. And it makes a big difference. I'm personally praying that God will restore the Bible Conference movement. Darrell disagrees with me on that, and of course, as you know, I'm always right and always wrong. What is the major premise is? I'm always right. The minor premise is you're always wrong. And then he says, get off the premises, you know. But he thinks the Bible Conference movement really can't come back. That is, looking at it naturally, because now you have 2 workers in nearly every household. The mother and the father are both working, and they can't get off at the same time, and so forth and so forth. But I disagree with him on that. I just am praying that God will restore that Bible Conference movement. Folks, I tell you, it was a mighty power in the hands of God. Lots of lives were changed through that. Lots of lives were changed through that. And we need it back. How many of you have had an experience with the Bible Conference movement and at least partly agree on that? Could I see your hands? Yes, a few of you have. And most of you haven't. But I tell you, a lot of the meetings that independent Baptists have had have been closely akin to that. And yet I do think they've lacked some of that message. All right, there's your diagram. You see the two doctrines, salvation by Christ alone, not by Christ plus something else, the two messengers, and then the two results. Not long ago I was reading something on Galatians in which the person said, it's not a logical book. To me, it's one of the most logical books I've ever read. Why, folks, that's just the whole message right there. Right there. The Apostle Paul is somebody, you know, some folks preach against what they call the deeper life. I don't like the expression. But really what they're doing is they're preaching against a lot of Paul's epistles. I don't like the expression. But it's the Christian life. It's the Christian life. And they're the two messengers. And you know, some teaching on the deeper life really has Galatianism in it. Some of it does. Some of it does. But the message is a clear, simple message. Christ only. And he doesn't need to be supplemented. Well, Christ only, but you need to go to purgatory. On page 89, as I go in the study, I'll feel free from time to time to leave out one or more things, and it's deliberately done. Not somebody might catch later and say, you forgot to do that. This on the North and South Galatian theory, I may say a word about next time, but I want to take this third principle. Ask God to open your heart completely to the distinctive contribution of Galatians. I believe the distinctive contribution of Galatians lies in the fact that it is the most Protestant book in the Bible. Galatians is the most Protestant book in the Bible. That word Protestant originated at the Diet of Spires in 1529 AD. You see, Martin Luther in 1517 started the Protestant Reformation. That's the date many give for it, 1517, when he nailed those theses against indulgences, against the abuse of indulgences, to the University Wittenball wall at Wittenberg. Get the thing untied there. And at the Diet of Spires, you know, they talk about the diet of worms. And somebody said, I'm glad I don't have to go on that diet. Diet of worms. Of course, the diet was just a church council. And the Council of Spires in 1529 AD. And then Martin Luther's followers were officially called Protestants. You know, people ask you sometime, are you a fundamentalist? Are you such and such? And I'm just glad to say, yeah, I'm a fundamentalist. But I really think my position is summarized in this. You know, I stress a lot common denominator. I'm a Presbyterian background. Most of you are of Baptist background. But I'm common denominator with you. Much more so than I am with a lot of my Presbyterian friends. Even in the PCA. Even in the PCA. But I'm a common denominator Protestant. That's really what my position is. Common denominator Protestant. There's very little real difference between the true Baptist teaching and the true Presbyterian teaching. You may not believe it, but it is. Very little difference. And there's very little difference between the old-time Methodist teaching of John Wesley and Charles Wesley and the Baptist and Presbyterian teaching. There is little. Pastor Wood doesn't agree with me on that fully. Again, he's wrong, see? No, but in essence, he does agree. You know these words I've quoted to you. He wills that I should wholly be. Who can withstand his will? The purpose of his grace in me surely shall fulfill. Charles Wesley wrote that. Sounds like Calvinism. Sounds like Calvinism. They often say that a man, well, a true Christian is kind of like an old-time Methodist when he gets up off his knees. But then he's a Calvinist when he's down on his knees. You know, I'm about to write after a long wait, I'm about to write my cousin Margaret Sells, who was a missionary, Presbyterian missionary in China, and tell about this Chinese Christian who was very successful in getting people to come to church. Others couldn't. He got them to come. Somebody asked, what's your secret? And now let me see if I can remember the exact words. He said, oh yes, I get down on my knees and I talkie. Then I get up off my knees and I walkie. See, well, that's the Christian life, really. That's the Christian life. And there's a sense in which you don't get up off your knees. You stay on your knees and still walkie. You know, but it's the most Protestant book in the Bible. I believe in protesting. Years ago I read the statement, Protestantism no longer protests. And if a person doesn't protest, he is not a Protestant. Hold your breath now. Dr. Billy Graham, he is not a Protestant. He is not a Protestant. He is considered by many to be the unofficial voice of Protestantism. But he is not a Protestant because he doesn't really protest. He has Roman Catholic priests on his program with him and all that kind of thing, but he is not a Protestant. He's not a Protestant. I want to ask now, don't vote to please me on this. How many of you, and I'll just try to look generally and not specify any individual in my own mind, how many of you agree with that he's not a Protestant? All right, don't ask the rest of you. Just let you know you're all wrong. I like to say that, I'd like for y'all to laugh at me a little more on that when I say it, because I think sometimes my friend Dan Graham says if he can get people to laughing a little bit, he can hit them in the face with a dead fish and they'll still take it, you know? And I think there's a point there. I think some of us fundamentalists need to hit people in the face with a dead fish, but with a little bit of fun behind it, so that folks won't get too mad. Well,
if Billy Graham believes what he says he believes, then I think there's real reason to question whether or not he's even saved.
Well, now you can. If that's right, you can make, well, I'll make the statement that I have often made as an illustration of Matthew 7:24 to 27, right at the end. Well, I guess it's 7:21 to 27. Jesus says, many shall say to me in that day, Lord, Lord, in thy name have we not cast out demons? Yet I will say, depart from me, I never knew you. Now you see, casting out demons is the superlative degree of spiritual power. That's the superlative degree of spiritual power. And then people say he couldn't be saved when he's gotten the results he's gotten. My answer is, I believe Matthew clearly shows you're wrong on that. Matthew shows he could get the results he gets without being saved. Because you could even cast out demons and still never know the Lord. Now that's Scripture, see, whether or not he's actually saved. I guess I'll have to go. How many of you knew my beloved life companion? Boy, I refer to her every now and then, but I think of her practically all the time, kind of in the back of my mind. And she was after me, said, now Hub, you're too extreme. You're too extreme. Don't be extreme. And then one day, out of a clear blue sky, she came forth with this. She said, do you think Dr. Billy Graham could be the Antichrist? Well, I won't go into detail to tell you what my answer was. Some of you say you're not coming back. Well, I think this is the only time I've ever told a public group that. I've told Darrell and a few of my close friends that. But I think that this is the only public group I've ever told that. Well, if any of you knew my beloved life companion, you knew she didn't go around tearing everybody to pieces. She did anything by that. She really loved, oh, Hub, don't be extreme. And man, I tell you, I put that in my pipe and smoked it for a long time after she said that. What is Protestantism? Protestantism is protesting not just against Roman Catholicism. I can protest against Roman Catholicism and not be a Protestant. Many independent Baptists are talking against the Roman Catholics all the time, and they're not Protestants. It's protesting by my life and by my lips against Galatianism. Roman Catholicism is one illustration of Galatianism, but it's only one illustration of Galatianism. It's protesting against Galatianism, anything that supplements Christ. And oh, we need that today, folks. Years ago I read this statement: if we're not careful, we'll have to fight the battle of the Protestant Reformationism all over again. Well, I'm telling you, it's not just the battle against Roman Catholicism, but it's the battle against all forms of Galatianism. And they had other forms of Galatianism in those days. Roman Catholicism had taken over as the world religion, you see, and all that. Of course, it was still fighting the Muslim religion, but it had taken over in many ways, and that's why we think of it in terms of that. But Martin Luther fought far more than the battle against Romanism. He fought the battle against Galatianism. You say he needed some things. Yes, he does. And every child of God needs some things. And you know, you don't realize you need those things till the Lord supplies the need and gets you over it. You don't realize how bad it was until He gets you over it. I mean, in a limited way, until He delivers you from it. Now let me see what I want to do in the last hour of the class. On page 91, just the first, Paul's severity in the writing of Galatians. Mention all illustrations of the fact that Galatians is the most severe in tone of Paul's letters. Let me mention three. And by the way, that clock is a little bit fast. First is, Paul omits appreciation and praise. He omits appreciation and praise. You see, generally, he begins and says, I thank my God for you. And even when he wrote 1 Corinthians and he had to deal with immorality in the church and all these other deep-seated needs, he still said, I thank my God for you. Thank my God for you. But he didn't in Galatians. Instead of saying, I thank my God, he said, I marvel. I marvel that you're so quickly removed from Him who called you in the grace of Christ unto a different gospel. You take the expression, God bless you. Do you use that in dealing with everybody? God bless you. You can mean the right thing. You know, there's a verse in Acts that says, God sent His Son to bless you in turning you away from your iniquities. But often when you use the expression, God bless you, it means something else to people. And if I find a Gothardite, I don't say God bless you, because he's away from the ground of God's blessing, which is Christ only. Which is Christ only. You be careful how you fling that around. You know, Matthew Henry, the old Puritan commentator, said that many use that expression, God bless you, as a byword. I think that's true. You tune in television and some sports broadcast, God bless you, God bless you. And then somebody, politician speaking, God bless you and good night, and all that. I wouldn't say that to people in general. Now, I could mean the right thing, but they don't mean the right thing by it. They mean something else. And they're away from the ground of blessing if they're away from the pure gospel of Christ. All right, Paul omits appreciation and praise. Doesn't say I thank my God, but he says I marvel. And then the second thing is that he omits requests for prayer. He doesn't ask them to pray for him. Over and over he says, brethren, pray for us. Pray for us. But he doesn't say that in Galatians. Why? Because they aren't on praying ground. Before I came in, I heard y'all singing, on Christ the solid rock I stand, all other ground is sinking sand. And you see, if somebody's bogged down in the form of Galatianism, he's not on praying grounds. I don't want a Catholic to pray for me. I don't want him to pray for me. He's not on praying ground. Because it's Christ plus something else. You know, I could give this, the doctrine, you know, in chapters 3 and 4 in a placid way, and, oh, brother, that was great. And then at the time anybody mentions something about Roman Catholicism, a person says, oh, you're talking against one of my best friends. Seventh-day Adventists, I don't want them to pray for me because they're not on praying ground. On Christ the solid rock I stand. All other ground is sinking sand. You say God can answer the prayers of an unsaved person, but not in this connection when he definitely denies free grace, salvation by grace alone, and adds something else to it. Somebody believes in baptismal regeneration. I want him to pray for me. He's not on praying ground. Praying ground is Christ alone. I don't want those who believe in psychiatrical victory to pray for me because they're not on praying ground. Folks, that goes deep. And you're just bound to be considered critical if you really try to follow through on that. Because you say, am I criticizing? No, I think I'm letting God criticize. But I'm trying to, you see, you can give a person, you can speak against his religious beliefs and things like that, but you can just treat him, well, like people are saying, now we're against homosexuality. But well, I know Dr. Billy Graham made this statement. Once I read it. Clearly he said, some of my best friends are homosexuals, but I don't treat them any differently from the way I treat others. See? We meet them and say, God bless you. Yeah, in turning you away from that homosexual stuff. See, that's the way he does it. This is severe business. And Paul omits requests for prayer. And I believe the reason is that you're not on praying ground if you supplement Christ. I'm not on praying ground if I supplement Christ. And then the third illustration of the severity of Galatians is individual verses. Let me give you 3 of these. Chapter 1, verse 8. Though we or an angel from heaven preach any other gospel, let him be anathema. The ASV says anathema. The King James here says accursed. Later on, when anathema is used in the New Testament, the King James says anathema along with the ASV, but here it says accursed, which is strong language. Let him be accursed. Boy, that's strong language, folks. Then 1 Corinthians 16:22, if any man loveth not the Lord Jesus Christ, let him be anathema, accursed. And then he says Maranatha. Maranatha means, O Lord, come. And you know, the King James puts a comma after the first part of the statement. Let him be anathema, comma, Maranatha. I think the ESV is right there. It puts a period. Let him be anathema, period. Maranatha, O Lord, come. That is, come and deliver thy people from all this false stuff. Deliver the world from all this false stuff. Then chapter 3, verse 1. O foolish Galatians, senseless Galatians. You just don't have any sense. Well, that's strong language, folks. Foolish Galatians. I think often older preachers can face people with stronger language than young preachers can. Generally speaking, I know there some of my students who were in my classes years ago, and they hear me now. They think I've changed a lot, or I've just gotten older. And I think people are willing, usually, I don't mean they don't criticize, sure, let them do that, but they expect an older person to use stronger language than a young snort. You know, they just say that's a young snort and he's just blowing off a lot of steam and so forth. Well, this is an old snort. But I think they'll usually take something from an old snort they won't take from a young snort. You put that through your Baptist pipe and see what you come up with it. He says, 3:1, "O foolish, senseless Galatians, you have no sense." Now watch this. Who did, can you give me the word?
Bewitched.
Who did bewitch you? You're under a witch. You're bewitched. I have a very, I won't want to let any cats out of the bag wrongly, but I had a conversation this with one of my friends at the Bible college years ago. And he said, "Sometime I may discuss with you." He never did. And I was glad he didn't. He said, "I may discuss this with you, whether or not people can be under the spell of a witch." And then it's a twofold thing. Can an unsaved person bewitch you? Yes. Can a Christian bewitch you? Sure can. Sure can. A lot of folks are led into this witchcraft business of psychiatrical victory and all that through Christians. Through Christians. You say, not sure they're saved. Well, I'm sure some of them would have to be saved somewhere along the line. Christians can bewitch you. How do you bewitch people? By supplementing Christ. By supplementing Christ. I want to tell you folks, one of the great bewitchers in the world today is Dr. James Dobson. He is bewitching people. People are under his witchcraft. It's witchcraft. Because it supplements Christ. Supplements Christ. Severe is this epistle. And then chapter 5 verse 12. "I would that they that unsettle you would even go beyond circumcision." What does he mean? Go beyond circumcision. Well, the Greek here literally is would mutilate themselves. Well, we use a very shocking word, and I'm going to use it to let you know what he's saying. Castrate themselves. He says, I wish they'd go beyond circumcision and just castrate themselves. What's he mean? He means this. When a person is mutilated like that, he loses the power of reproduction. He can't reproduce his offspring. And Paul says, I would that they could not reproduce their offspring. But I tell you, these folks who are engaged in psychiatrical victory these days are reproducing their offspring, and they are flooding the Christian church with this stuff. They're flooding the Christian church with this stuff. I was going to close with the hymn we began with, and I'm not that far. Let me see, what would be a good place to stop with? Looking unto Jesus only. That's the positive message. That's what I've been talking about all the way through. No, you haven't. You've been talking about Dr. James Dobson. I haven't. I've been talking about looking unto Jesus only. But a lot of folks never will get it until you call the name. They won't get it. They'll think it's wonderful. Oh, great. And then they'll come right back and contradict everything that the book of Galatians stands for. And I tell you, I'm talking about this old boy. Oh, I've made a lot of changes through the years. I've been against this psychological stuff for years. I've been against it for, years. But I tell you, I've seen some of it in my own life in a way I didn't used to see it. All right, let's look to the Lord in prayer. Will you ask the Lord just to write this on your heart? Looking unto Jesus only. Let me say these words and then ask you to repeat them aloud with me to the Lord. Looking unto Jesus only. Will you repeat them aloud with me to the Lord, everybody together? Looking unto Jesus only. Say them again, everybody. Looking unto Jesus only. We ask in His precious name. Amen.
Just hold on there. I've got several announcements I need to make, and so I ask you just to hang on till we get these made. First, let me ask Henry Douglas, Stephen, Philip, or Chris, you right there, or you come on. Chris, come up here.